and have site integrity. Recreation-based sites must have statewide appeal with recreation based on the resource and have significant acreage. Our 92 parks and historic sites face many threats from dangers like invasive species, crumbling infrastructure, and inappropriate development, two measures calling for the divesting of public lands. And Shirley will discuss a few of these concerns.
Canton Estates, a proposed development on the immediate northern border of Gans Creek Wild Area at Rockbridge Memorial State Park, is an example of urban sprawl. MPA, Friends of Rockbridge, and many other organizations and park advocates have testified at a series of hearings in Columbia in opposition to the zoning and development as planned. The likelihood of adverse effects on the unobstructed scenic vistas of the wild area that is one of only 12 such areas in the state, and the only one so close to a major city, and impacts on the water quality of Gans Creek that is one of only 44 state outstanding resource waters, and that is in our state with thousands of rivers and streams. The developer withdrew his proposal in June, and then in August, he asked the city to review a revised concept plan that included a waiver of the required one-year waiting period. The city council denied that waiver request, and so now the hope is that the council may work with the Boone County Commission to come up with a plan to protect the sensitive areas surrounding the park. Feral swine are a destructive invasive species that continues to threaten state parks as well as public and private lands in large swaths of Missouri. MPA supports legislation that prioritizes public education, banning or discouraging public hunting and illegal hog releases, and more coordinated trapping in priority zones. There was some legislative success in these areas during the last session. Parks with known hog damage include Johnson Shut-ins, Tom Sauk, Roaring River, Stockton, Hawn, Elephant Rocks, St. Francis, Washington, Sam A. Baker, and Wapapella State Parks. Park supporters will recognize these as parks with extraordinary natural resources, including carefully restored glades, prairies, woodlands, fens, and wetlands. Other invasive species such as bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, and winter creeper are an ongoing problem addressed by state parks in their natural resource stewardship program. Kendra will now discuss the historic challenges MPA has faced with CAFOs.
2007 was a significant year for the Missouri Parks Association. MPA celebrated their 25th year as an organization and sued the Department of Natural Resources over a proposed hog CAFO near Arrow Rock State Historic Site. This is significant because this was the first time in MPA's history they took legal action against the department. It's also significant because Missouri State Parks and Historic Sites are administered by the Division of State Parks, which is a part of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. In addition to the proposed CAFO near Arrow Rock, applications for permits to build and operate CAFOs near Battle of Athens State Historic Site in the far northeastern corner of the state and Roaring River State Park in the southwest threaten visitors' enjoyment of the parks during the same time period, and citizens in their vicinity joined together to petition the Clean Water Commission and DNR to deny the permits. For this discussion, we're going to focus on the proposed CAFO and lawsuit near Arrow Rock. If you're not familiar with Arrow Rock, it's a village in Saline County in the central part of the state that is home to Arrow Rock State Historic Site and State Park Campground. It is a National Historic Landmark, has 150,000 visitors a year or more, and is home to the Arrow Rock Lyceum Theater. In December of 2006, a farmer from the area notified adjoining landowners that he was applying for a construction permit for a 4,800 hog operation in Saline County. One of the landowners happened to be an active member of the Friends of Arrow Rock and realized that the historic village of Arrow Rock was less than 2 miles downwind from the operation, and the cemeteries and Prairie Park on the National Register of Historic Places to the west of town were only a half a mile downwind. In response, Arrow Rock supporters sent letters and had meetings with Saline County Commission, the State Park Advisory Board, DNR Director Doyle Childers, Governor Matt Blunt, and a host of other public officials. Much like today, DNR leaders emphasized their limited authority to do anything but ensure the applications complied with the Missouri law regarding water quality. To seek help in drafting legislation that would prohibit CAFOs from locating within 5 miles of any state park or historic site, a group, Citizens to Protect State Parks and Historic Sites, was formed. They formed alliances with opponents of the Chicken CAFO near Roaring River and the Hog CAFO near the Battle of Athens. A measure was introduced in the House, and a resolution to support this concept was heard and then tabled by the State Park Advisory Board amid concern about property rights. During the 2007 legislative session, a bill was introduced to drastically weaken control of the factory farms by stripping local governments of their authority to pass health ordinances that could control their impact. The bill faced strong opposition in the Senate as a result of effective citizens' action and was declared dead in April. An effort to prevent CAFOs from locating within 5 miles of any state park or historic site was discussed, but didn't get any traction. Eventually, as you know, bills were passed to protect the right to farm and overturn local control. After many frustrating months of hearing that DNR cannot deny a permit to a CAFO that meets the minimum requirements of the state's water quality laws, the MPA Board of Directors passed a resolution on September 10th, 2007, which framed MPA's decision to take legal action. It was resolved that MPA join the Friends of Arrow Rock, represented by Washington University Interdisciplinary Environmental Clinic, in their proceedings aimed at achieving DNR's compliance with its statutory obligations under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and certain Missouri statutes. On October 11, 2007, MPA and its co-plaintiffs filed suit to establish the responsibility of DNR and its director to protect state parks and historic sites. MPA's resolution stated, "It should be understood that we all concur we are faced with a serious situation and that CAFOs pose a significant threat to the quality and integrity of state parks and historic sites. Any legal action we may take is not in the spirit of hostility to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, but rather in defense of the resources administered by the agency and the integrity of the visitor experience. Furthermore, we act with confidence that the outstanding staff of Missouri Department of Natural Resources and its Parks Division will welcome our defense of our state parks and historic sites." Later that month, in a speech at Arrow Rock that marked the 25th anniversary of the Missouri Parks Association, Missouri Attorney General Jay Nixon said he would not represent the DNR in the lawsuit and would instead hire an outside attorney for the state. Nixon said the DNR should have not issued the construction permit for the hog farm because of the threat it posed to Arrow Rock. Also, it should be noted around this time, Nixon launched a campaign for the governor's seat. The first lawsuit to be initiated and concluded was the federal proceeding. Because the developer of the CAFO near Arrow Rock had been awarded more than $100,000 in federal grant funds from the Natural Resources Conservation Service for construction of the facility, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act was set in motion. This section requires federal agencies to consider the effects of historic properties of projects they carry out, assist, fund, permit, license, or approve throughout the country. If a federal or federally assisted project has potential to affect historic properties, a Section 106 review will take place. The Arrow Rock case was the first Section 106 proceeding in the nation related to a CAFO. However, the issue became moot when the farmer turned down the federal funds, thus negating the Section 106 cause. NRCS subsequently terminated the process in November of 2007. The second legal action began with a filing in the Circuit Court of Cole County by the Miller Law Firm on behalf of MPA, Friends of Arrow Rock, and the Village of Arrow Rock against the Department of Natural Resources and its director, Doyle Childers. The petition reviewed the evidence of the impact of airborne CAFO emissions on public health and the well-being, and argued that Childers' approval of the hog farm permit was in direct violation of his obligation to preserve and protect state parks and historic sites under the Missouri Constitution and state statutes related to parks and historic preservation. During this time frame, the farmer who was granted a permit by DNR for construction of the CAFO failed to begin construction or apply for extension of his permit, so it expired at the end of August 2008. DNR filed a motion to dismiss on basis that the case was moot since the permit was expiring. MPA and its co-petitioners had filed a motion for summary judgment in the case. On August 25, 2008, Cole County Circuit Judge Joyce handed down a decision ordering the DNR to revoke the permit for the hog farm. The 16-page ruling prohibited CAFOs within 15 miles of Arrow Rock and other nearby historic sites, and said the construction of CAFOs near state parks and historic sites poses an unacceptable health risk because of odors and dangerous airborne pollutants emitted by them. She cited reports by the UN, the World Health Organization, and the US EPA to support her position. DNR filed a notice of appeal. In 2008, Attorney General Nixon was elected governor, and Chris Koster won the election as Attorney General. Although Nixon and the new DNR director, Mark Templeton, apparently let it be known that they did not wish to appeal the judge's decision, Attorney General Koster went ahead with the appeal on behalf of Templeton and DNR. Joined by the Farm Bureau and others, the briefs filed with the appellate court included intervening appeals by the Missouri Farm Bureau Federation, the Ag Business Association, the Cattlemen's Association, the Pork Association, the Dairy Association, and the Missouri Egg Council. The lower court had not admitted them to the case as interveners, but the Court of Appeals treated their appeals as amicus briefs. After a brief oral argument in March of 2010 before a 3-judge panel of the Western District Court of Appeals, on April 6th, the court ruled in effect that the case was moot because the farmer's permit had expired. MPA's attorney believed the case was incorrectly decided and filed a motion for rehearing on April 21st. It was overruled and denied on June 1st, and that indicated MPA's intention to appeal to the Missouri Supreme Court. In the summer of 2010, MPA, Village of Arrow Rock, Friends of Arrow Rock, filed an application for transfer to the Supreme Court. Amicus briefs were filed by the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, Roaring River Parks Alliance, Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the United States. In August 2010, the application for transfer to the Supreme Court was denied. And that's where the story ends. I reached out to one of my board members when we were preparing for this presentation to ask what happened. She stated the farmer who sought the permit never reapplied, though MPA and others feared he might. So I recall having felt disappointed that the issue had never really been put to rest. So after all the time and effort and money put forth, the case was closed, but there was no closure. And with that ending, I'll now hand it over to Shirley to discuss the risk of CAFOs near state parks.
Well, as you all know, as we all live downstream, we also live downwind. Let's see, since CAFOs are not regulated really under the Clean Air Act, the regulatory authority is limited to weak odor and nuisance rules. And Missouri does not allow local regulations to be stricter than the state, nor does it allow state regulations to be stricter than federal, as Sophie and Melissa mentioned earlier. And as an agriculture-friendly state, it's difficult to enforce rules contrary to ag interests. Air pollutants include greenhouse gases, sulfur, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, methane, and particulate matter that may potentially contain fecal matter or skin cells. DNR's air pollution program can really only respond to odor complaints that fall within their authority. The DNR water pollution program regulates CAFOs. As was mentioned, pollutants may include manure that has been overapplied, becomes runoff, or that is leaked from lagoons. According to the Joplin Globe, the 4,800 hogs that they were planning for the Arrow Rock site can yield 2 million gallons of manure per year, which would become quite a significant problem for both odor and water issues. The nutrients released in manure, again, include nitrogen and phosphorus, which can stimulate algae growth, become toxic for fish and other aquatic life. So the threat to Missouri state parks would depend on the size and location of the CAFO relative to the state park, historic site, or conservation area, as you've all mentioned. And also the prevailing wind and the presence of water bodies in the state park. Many state parks are located on rivers, they contain caves, or they rely on other water features for their natural, cultural, or recreational value, as well as being vulnerable to the effect of the watershed on those water bodies or on their drinking water. Other challenges to state parks, as again has been mentioned, include right to farm legislation, no stricter than rules, and other legislative attempts to protect the ag industry. We have to rely on the legislature and the DNR to protect our state parks, and that's why it's really important. And we follow what's going on in the legislature real closely with the help of MCE and the Sierra Club and certain other organizations in order to keep an eye on that and hopefully encourage the Department of Natural Resources to do their job and protect the state parks. So our advocacy is very important. Kendra will discuss that a bit.
So what you can do, you can join MPA's advocacy efforts to protect state parks. The association's members and volunteers continue to support the threefold mission of the Missouri State Park System through education and advocacy, and MPA remains vigilant to protect actions that threaten our parks. Our legislative committee monitors the bills, as Shirley said, proposed in hearings conducted, testifies when appropriate, and sends out alerts to our membership to take action when necessary. Missouri State Park staff are able to provide fact-based information, only testimony as it relates to park issues. Advocacy groups like MPA are able to testify and advocate to be for or against a bill or issue, but as a 501c3, we cannot voice our support for or opposition to elected officials or candidates. So if you want to be added to our mailing or emailing list, you can become a member at our website, and our information's on the next slide after Shirley has a drink of water. And if you want to read about any part, like past park issues, our website has all of our newsletters on it called Heritage, and it's really comprehensive history of things that have happened since MPA started in 1984. So with that, we'll take any questions or whatever's next on the agenda. So
Sophie, are you going to handle the questions?
Yeah, the floor is wide open.
if anybody has questions for us.
Yeah, but you can go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Steve, do you have anything to add? Where were you during all of this CAFO legislation?
If I start getting into the background details, it gets pretty gory.
Yeah.
Facility, and very quickly, the facility in Arrow Rock, that all started actually in 2000. And because we had a strong gubernatorial support and a strong support from the Attorney General, we pretty much stopped everything in its tracks because we made it known that it was going to be a very difficult process to get a permit for a facility that was near a state park. So really, and I know everybody on this call, I know everybody knows this, this all really starts with the leadership of the governor. If a governor and the Attorney General, if they're sympathetic to the kinds of things that we're talking about tonight, and if they're with us and truly with us in how they feel about public lands, they work very hard to support whatever actions by the DNR need to be taken above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak. There's an interesting piece that timeline-wise, that not a lot of people know about. Pretty much the permits, as Shirley and Sophie and Melissa have talked about, and Kendra already, things are structured against us in essence because of the way the legislature has approached things here in Missouri. However, in that whole process, there's only one timeline that is not governed by regulation, and that is when the permit goes through the process, it's then put on the desk of the DNR director. And what's unusual is there's no timeline for signing that permit. So with the governor's support, myself and other previous directors at different times let those permits sit on their desk for sometimes a couple of years until the political pressures were so great or till somebody decided that they wanted to stop doing what they were doing. And that's kind of what happened with Arrow Rock. I disagree a little bit with that. There was nothing decided. There was something decided, and that is when citizens work together and when people work hard to stop something, even when everything appears against them, you can be successful, even in a state like Missouri. And that was the outcome there. They just gave up because they were tired of jumping through the hoops that so many of folks that are on this call and others that we've all known spent the time to and make the effort to make things difficult for them in a legal way, in an appropriate way, and to do the kinds of things we think are important. But I'm worried about going forward because of how everything we've been talking about up to now, how skewed things have become in favor of big agriculture and the wrong economics. And I think I know Kendra and Shirley hear a lot from legislators, and they've spent a lot of time in the legislature supporting our state parks. I think they hear from everybody that state parks are the greatest thing going until somebody needs a permit or wants to do something that is not in their best, not in our best interest. So this is a very tough and difficult road. And I think the only way that we're going to be able to be positive in the long run in our efforts is to work closely together. So I think what we're doing here tonight is almost is groundbreaking and should be done on a lot of issues. And we should keep this up on the subject, public lands, CAFOs, and agriculture. We need to keep this moving, keep this up, and keep working together.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve, that's why I needed you on the call to bring it all together.
Well, no, you guys done. This has been great. There's a lot of things I have forgotten, and that was such a difficult time period because there was also on the State Park Foundation Board, and I know I'll say it because I know he wouldn't mind. He loves to know that. I'd love to know that he's involved, but there were Whitney Kerr from Kansas City owned a very significant historic property near Arrow Rock and was very instrumental in helping fund the Friends of Arrow Rock and do different things in the community. And he wasn't about to give up. And when he realized that there were so many allies, he was willing to keep fighting and keep moving forward. And people like that, and having our organizations identify key people in a community that can be effective is just so important. And we saw that for those 3 CAFOs and with what's happened, and not just the Arrow Rock, but at Roaring River and then other sites in Southwest Missouri.
Does anyone else have any questions?
This is Barb Chicario, and I have kind of a large question, but I've been thinking about the rural economies as compared to the economies of the cities in Missouri. And I'm just wondering if we removed from the total equation, economic equation of the state of Missouri, if we took out St. Louis and Kansas City and just looked at the rural economies, how would the contribution of CAFOs in terms of jobs compared to the jobs that are generated through our recreation, our state parks? And I know that there was a number that said something like 14,000 jobs, but I think a lot more jobs are created, ancillary jobs through restaurants in the area and just bringing tourism in. And so I don't even know how that could be done, but I would love to be able to compare the amount of jobs that are brought in through CAFOs, that are provided by CAFOs as compared to recreational contributions. Because I think money talks, and I think that's what state politicians might listen to. And I also want to say I'm a proud member of the Missouri Parks Association and have been for many years. So yay,
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Thank you, Barb.
Thank you for your work.
Mhm. I was just gonna say, Kendra?
No, I was going to say, like, some of the data we have, it's from 2011. And I know when they did that study, they tried to include not like the further impact from like the state park, but I don't know.
Yeah, and the CAFOs have the Missouri Farm Bureau behind them, and so I think that's where a lot of their lobbying power comes from, as opposed to CAFO employees themselves. They just
Yeah, do you have any numbers, Sophie or Melissa, like on the number of employees? Does anyone?
Yeah, so to Barb's point, I don't know if those specific analyses are out there, like really digging in on that level, but it's an important point to consider. I do want to keep us moving along here, though.
Mhm.
And I think that this is actually, yeah, Melissa?
Hey, Barb, you're welcome to email me and I can explain the difficulties of number crunching this. I won't be able to get to it till January, but happy to talk about it. So
Okay,
Sophie, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to the point of like community organizing, as well as getting a little bit into seeing this comparison between the benefits of outdoor recreation versus what limited jobs maybe a CAFO can provide to the community. I do want to introduce Gordon and him speaking on behalf of the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance in Arkansas. Gordon is the president of the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance and an organic farmer, as well as a cabin rental business owner, a longtime resident on the Little Buffalo. The Buffalo River Watershed Alliance is also a nonprofit 501c3 organization, which was created in early 2013 in direct response to the discovery of the CNH hog farm, which had been sited and near completion on the Big Creek, which is a major tributary to the Buffalo National River. I will abridge my introduction for you there, Gordon, and let you take it away.
Thanks, Sophie, and thanks to everybody for inviting me to speak about our experience down here in Arkansas and to share a little bit to see if it might be of some help to some other people. As Sophie said, the organization that I work with formed in 2013 in direct response to the discovery that a 6,500 head hog operation had been permitted with no public notice in just a few miles upstream on one of the major tributaries of the Buffalo National River. So I'm going to hit the high points here. It's been a long battle since 2013, but you can go to our website. I don't have fancy slides. Our bandwidth is skinny band, is not broadband here. So, but go to our website, buffaloriveralliance.org, or just Google Buffalo River Hog Farm, and you'll find us. And I'm happy to respond to any questions offline as well as online today. What made our efforts here successful was the fact that the Buffalo National River was in close proximity. For those of you who may not know, the Buffalo River was the nation's first national river. It was created in 1972 as the result of a hard-won campaign primarily spearheaded by the Ozark Society, whose motto at the time, there were bumper stickers all over the Ozarks and the state of Arkansas that saved the buffalo. And so when this project started, we adopted that same slogan and made it Save the Buffalo River again. And we've now modified it once again since we've closed the hog farm to Save the Buffalo River forever, because there are lots of other impacts to the river that we're now having to deal with. But so in 2012, CNH Hog Farm received an NPDES permit from our State Department of Environmental Quality. That's a federally, the EPA allows Arkansas to implement their NPDES program, and that's basically a no discharge permit. There were efforts in the early 2000s by EPA was encouraging the states to shift over all of their discharge permits to no discharge permits. And so they were encouraging the states to adopt the NPDES program for all liquid animal waste projects. Well, the state developed the NPDES program, and CNH was the first applicant to receive a permit under that program. And they quickly discovered some inadequacies in that program, the primary one being the lack of public notice. For all other permits in the state of Arkansas, there's a strong public notice component that requires that local landowners, neighboring landowners, local authorities be notified. In the case of this new permit, the only public notice was a notice run in the public notices section of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, our statewide newspaper, which very few people in this part of the state received. So it went unnoticed and was quietly given a permit. Quietly began construction in August of 2012. And it wasn't until the end of December of that year, that the National Park Service caught wind of it, so to speak, and wrote a letter to the Department of Environmental Quality expressing their concerns, and that letter went public, and then the public found out about it through that process. Once the public discovered it, there was a huge public outcry in the Buffalo River Watershed where I live. And so there were public meetings held in early 2013. And by spring of that year, our organization had organized as an all-volunteer nonprofit 501c3 organization. And we began to organize to try to close this facility down. We were told time and again by attorneys and advisors that there's no way you're going to shut down an existing hog farm that's following all the rules, no matter how much you don't like those rules. They followed them, and you can't shut them down. And so we forged on anyway. And one of the things that, as I said, made this successful was the proximity of a national park. And the Buffalo National River, for those of you who may not know much about it, it's not like Yellowstone or Big Bend or Yosemite or some of our other large national parks. It's a small park. It's 135 miles long, but only makes up about little less than 100,000 acres. So it's this thin corridor, narrow corridor that runs along the bottom of the watershed. And as such, it's very susceptible to activities that take place on the tributaries which feed it, which make up 89% of the watershed is outside of the park boundaries. So that's one feature that makes it fragile and susceptible to damage from those tributaries, but it's also characterized by karst terrain. That's a geological term that describes this porous limestone substrata in our part of the state that's filled with cracks and crevices and sinkholes and caves and springs, and surface water quickly enters the groundwater and emerges in unexpected places, as we'll discuss a little later. So we've got this important state icon that's featured in all of our tourism documents. You'll see sections of the Buffalo River, whether it's Hawksbill Crag or the Steel Creek Bluffs, are heavily featured to attract tourists to our state. And it also happens to run through two of the poorest counties in the state, counties that have very few employment opportunities. And my county, Newton County, has been undergoing a boom in the last 10 to 15 years in tourism. Our tourism economy is booming here, primarily taking the form of rental cabins, Airbnbs, those sort of things that rely on the Buffalo River to attract our customers, as I do in my own cabin. Buffalo River was not here, we would not be attracting all of those tourists. And just to put it in perspective, and this goes to the question that was mentioned earlier about comparing the benefits of CAFOs and the income produced locally by CAFOs to that produced by parks. In 2020, the Buffalo National River was visited by 1.5 million visitors who spent $66.3 million in communities near the park. That spending supported 960 jobs in the local area and had a cumulative benefit to the local economy of 76.1 million. So in contrast, that 960 jobs, the CNH CAFO, by all accounts, employed about six people. And besides the income generated, but to the owners, that organization paid about $2,000 a year in county taxes. So that was the benefit to our county compared to the millions that were being generated by the Buffalo National River. So that was part of our message that we thought was important. And as was said by one of the participants earlier, that message resonates with our lawmakers. They want to hear that economic benefit. And I think that made a lot of difference in our success. So one of the other keys to our success was our collaboration with other organizations. Early on, we joined forces with three other organizations, the Ozark Society, Arkansas Canoe Club, and the National Parks Conservation Association. And we named ourselves the Buffalo River Coalition. And we have continued to this day. We have weekly conference calls to this day discussing the Buffalo River. And the benefits of joining forces with these other organizations was that it increased our reach considerably. Together we filed a federal lawsuit against CNH, specifically against the Farm Services Administration and the Small Business Administration, who had issued the loans for the construction of the project. Our claim was that they had done an inadequate job on their environmental assessment, and the court agreed with us, the federal court agreed with us and required them to go back and redo that environmental assessment. Unfortunately, it reached the same conclusion, and it didn't do much in terms of slowing the hog farm down, but it did have national implications in that it made FSA and SBA be much more attentive to how they did those environmental assessments, and it put, by accounts, it put the brakes on a lot of loans that were going out to CAFOs across the country. So as part of our efforts with these other organizations, we engaged a lot of decision makers, all of them that we could find. We take every opportunity to to participate in the public process that we could. We made every meeting of the Pollution Control and Ecology Commission, which oversees the permitting process in Arkansas. We met regularly with the Department of Environmental Quality. We met with lawmakers at the legislature, and we had letter writing campaigns. We had house parties to write letters and to raise money. We engaged with the mayors, with our federal delegation. Former Congressman Ed Bethune, federal Congressman Ed Bethune, participated in a documentary to publicize the issue. We had a We Float, We Vote campaign where people got out on the river in canoes and kayaks with signs and got a lot of media attention about the importance of protecting the Buffalo River. We wrote to Cargill. Cargill was the integrator who owned the animals when this thing started. They were subsequently bought out by JBS, a Brazilian firm. And we did attempt to meet. We did meet with Cargill on numerous occasions with their swine division head to try to negotiate some sort of phased shutdown. Thought we were making progress, and then it all flew out the window. And then they sold that division lock, stock, and barrel to JBS. So JBS did not engage with us at all. So that was a disappointment, and one of the things that we regretted not being more successful at it. We also were I guess, disappointed that we couldn't engage the local community more than we did. And by local, I mean the immediate community around the CNH hog farm. It's a little town called Mount Judy, Arkansas. And it's very insulated community, very tight-knit community. And even though we knew there were people there who were opposed to the hog farm, few of them were willing to speak out about it because of the public pressure from their communities. And one woman who was, I think she was 87 at the time, did agree to go on camera and speak about her discomfort with it. She was right directly across from the application fields. And the smell was objectionable to her. The big creek ran through her front yard, and she was concerned about the impacts on the water that her grandson kayaked in. And because of her outspokenness on it, she was shunned at her local church. She received veiled threats from others in the community. The CNH owners were also active in the volunteer fire department and were first responders. And she was told that she should be more careful what she said, that they might be slow getting there if she needed the ambulance some night. So that's the sort of pressures that the local community was facing. But we called it a Stop the Stink campaign, where we sent postcards to every box holder and every mailing address in the area around there, asking people to report smells as they were going on, because we'd had reports that the Mount Judy school, which was right next to one of the spreading fields, abutted the spraying fields, we'd heard complaints from teachers and students both, that the smells in the corridors of the school were so bad they were getting headaches. But we were unable to get any responses to that, or insignificant responses to that campaign. So that was disappointing, but understandable. In most rural communities, I think that's probably the case. So some of the things that were most meaningful, I guess, about our efforts were our ability to engage Earth Justice. They were our public interest law firm that we worked with, Rise Law Center, to carry out our federal lawsuit. We also engaged with a number of local attorneys throughout the process, and were able to keep up pressure on CNH from the legal way. Unfortunately, CNH had the backing of the Farm Bureau, who paid their legal fees. So we were constantly battling the Farm Bureau message, that this was a property rights issue, and it was a right to farm issue, and so that we were constantly battling that message and trying to debunk those claims. But we had we were able to rally tremendous public support, again, because of the importance of the Buffalo National River and the experience that people nationwide have had. And in 2017, CNH, this NPDS permit that they initially had was a 5-year permit, which was a good thing, as it turned out, because it required them to renew that permit. So in 2017, they began the process of renewal, and which opened up the entire permit to public comment. Because we had missed the public notice in the first instance, we were unable to comment on the permit itself. So we couldn't make any of our arguments before the decision makers until they were applied for a new permit, and then the entire permit was reopened, subject to public comment. And our organization submitted an 80-page set of comments on that new permit. But more importantly, we were able to generate over 20,000 comments from people around the country, primarily from Arkansas, but lots from around the country through our coalition. That was more than the Department of Environmental Quality had ever had, and it took them several months to respond to those permits as they're required to under law. The governor, through our letter writing campaign, Governor Hutchinson stated that he had received more comments about this issue than any single issue in his term as governor. So we were successful in reaching the lawmakers and at least informing them about our concerns. The responses were not always that satisfying, but we knew that they were hearing what was being said, and they were very frustrated with being deluged with comments which we were not very sympathetic about. But then surprisingly, when this new permit was applied for by CNH and we were able to comment on it with substantive comments, and we prided ourselves on, we were not a bunch of, sign waving, raucous, marching on the street protesters. We prided ourselves on, and still do, on making sound, scientific, fact-based arguments and presenting them in a civil way. And I think that went a long way towards convincing the Department of Environmental Quality to reverse their decision on this permit. They had made a draft approval of the permit. The comment period took place. They received significant substantive comments, not just Save the Buffalo River comments, but substantive comments. And they couldn't defend their position to renew that permit. And so CNH everyone was surprised when that happened. That was a 180-degree about turn by the Department of Environmental Quality that no one was really expecting. And so they immediately filed an appeal, and they lost their appeal. And they tried to apply for other permits. They tried to go back and reapply for an NPDS permit. They were denied that. And so every opportunity was closed to them at that point, and they were fighting the legal battle at that point, and we were countering that with our attorneys. And so I think eventually what happened is they got tired of the fight, and we had been relentless since 2013, and at every turn we were there to meet their claims, and any chink in the permitting system. When they modified a permit, we were there to comment about the modifications. And we engaged the media. That was critical to our success. We had a columnist, an opinion columnist with the Democrat Gazette in Little Rock, who happened to be the nephew of Congressman John Paul Hammerschmidt, the late Congressman John Paul Hammerschmidt, who was key in the creation of the Buffalo National River in 1972. And so the Buffalo River was important to him. And he took this on as his project. Mike Masterson was his name. And he wrote, for 5 years, he wrote consistently, in opposition to the hog farm and kept it out there in the media. But we also had coverage from national outlets, the New York Times, the National Geographic, PBS. We had a number of documentaries that were produced. The Buffalo River was on the American Rivers Most Endangered River list twice. That brought it lots of negative national attention. We pointed all of these things out to the governor whenever they happened. And I think he got tired of hearing it as well. Not that he wasn't well intentioned, but he finally in 2019, in early 2019, they were denied their permit and were operating legal actions. June of 2019, the governor announced that he had negotiated a buyout deal. And the state, along with the Nature Conservancy put up $1 million and the state put up about $5.5 million to pay off the operators, and which allowed them to pay off their FSA and SBA loans and have some money in their pocket. And then the state acquired a conservation easement on the property, which would prevent it from ever being used for those purposes again. That's not that they couldn't move somewhere else and start back up, but so our organization from its inception had two goals. One was to close the CNH hog farm, and the second was to secure a permanent moratorium on any future hog farm permits in the Buffalo River watershed. We succeeded in our first goal. The second one is still a work in progress. It's unfortunate because when the governor announced the buyout, he also announced that he was instructing the Department of Environmental Quality to initiate a rulemaking to do just that, to implement a permanent moratorium. There's been a temporary moratorium on the record for the last 5 years, and that remains on the record, but the governor instructed DEQ to initiate rulemaking to make that permanent. They did so. In Arkansas, any rule changes have to be approved by the state legislature. It went to the legislature and the legislature struck it down. It's the kind of thing, one of the arguments was that, well, nobody's going to want another permit in that watershed after what the CNH boys went through. And that's probably true in the short term. While those of us are still alive that fought this fight, that's not going to happen again. But our concerns are that what happens in 10 years, 20 years from now, when the administrations have changed, the agencies have changed, institutional memory has faded. We want there to be something permanent on the books. But the fact is that under the political climate at this point in time is not conducive to that. It's worse now than it was when we started the process, and there just is there's not the appetite in our legislature to take anything like that on. So we're keeping a close eye on that goal. We're continuing to work for it. We're bringing up next year, 2022 is the 50th anniversary of the creation of the Buffalo River. And there's lots of events being planned by the Park Service and by others like ourselves. And one event we're doing is we're inviting all of the joint agriculture committee members who are the primary ones who would have influence over a rulemaking to come up for a 2-day event on the Buffalo with an evening presentation by the superintendent of the park. And next there'll be a float on the Buffalo and a bus tour to expose a lot of these lawmakers who may not have had personal experience on the river, to show them what the importance of it is and to impress upon them the economic importance of it to our poor part of the state. So, so some of the messages that I want to mention the fact that we did. I said that we made scientific arguments, and one thing we did early on is we were fortunate to have a retired karst hydrogeologist from the University of Arkansas, Professor Emeritus, who all shared our concerns about the buffalo, and he was an expert in diatrace studies. And one of our arguments was that this 2 million gallons a year of raw swine waste was being applied to a few acres of fields along this creek. And their claim was, well, it's just going to be absorbed by the plants, and it's not going to run off, and that's really a small amount when you consider it in inches of liquid that's being applied. And our concern has been that it's going to creep into the creeks. There's phosphorus in particular ties up in the soil and it gets released over long periods of time back into the water. But it also enters springs, enters sinkholes, emerges in springs. And so this professor did a diatrace study where he injected dye in a hand-dug well near the spreading fields. We obviously didn't have access to the spreading fields ourselves, but this was in a well that was surrounded by the spreading fields that the owner allowed us to use. And dye was injected into that hand dug well, and then was detected in 20 to 30 locations miles away, including in springs in the Buffalo River, including in springs in adjoining watersheds. The dye traveled under ridge tops, emerged in other watersheds, adjacent watersheds, and so it proved that there's no correlation between the way water moves underground and the way it moves on the surface. And it showed a clear linkage between that land and the Buffalo National River, which was 5 miles away. So that resulted in peer-reviewed journal articles and bolstered our scientific arguments, because we were up against, when the governor, the permit was initially issued by Governor Mike Beebe, who preceded Governor Hutchinson. And when the poop hit the fan, one of the things he did was he provided funding for the University of Arkansas Department School of Agriculture to undertake a 5-year study of the impact of the hog farm on the water in that area. And so they started a program. We were very critical of the work they did. It was an extension service program, which extension service is set up to assist farmers. And so there was our real complaint was that they were setting up their experiments to achieve the results that they wanted, essentially. But through our work with this hydrogeologist, we were able to rebut some of the claims that were made. And in fact, we had a water monitoring program. We still do. We received support from the Patagonia Foundation to do water quality monitoring on Big Creek, and we continue to do that work. And our data is submitted to our Department of Environmental Quality every year as part of their stream assessment program to determine the 303D list for impaired streams. Our data, along with other data by USGS and others, resulted in that stretch of Big Creek from the C&H hog farm to the Buffalo River being declared as impaired, the only impaired stream in that watershed. It was impaired for dissolved oxygen and E. coli. And so that was a piece of scientific data that we used to bolster our arguments that damage was being done, and it may not be as apparent as a lagoon bank, for example, in a flood of hog waste flowing down the hillsides, but it nevertheless was we called it a creeping catastrophe, as this was going to continue to release phosphorus, especially over many years to come.
Gordon, I might have to stop you for a minute.
Sure.
This has really been incredible, and I'm learning so much. We are running behind schedule a little bit, but we did get a great question. I don't want to cut you off mid-sentence, so please finish your thought, but I do appreciate
Oh, go ahead.
the question that's come in. Would you like me to read it to you, or can you see it?
Sure. Let me see if I got it here. Does ADQ have something like our Clean Water Commission? What was their role in permitting? I would guess, I'm not real familiar with the Clean Water Commission, but probably their equivalent in Arkansas would be the Pollution Control and Ecology Commission. That's a body made up of about 16 different both state agency people as well as appointees of the governor, and their job is to it's only got a staff of 2, and plus the commission, and they meet on a monthly basis, and their role is to approve changes to the regulations. They don't issue permits per se, but they do take up complaints about permits. So DEQ issues the permits according to the regulations that are promulgated through the Pollution Control Ecology Commission. And so when we began to bring legal challenges against CNH for various parts of their program, whether it was a permit modification or the permit renewal. That was heard before the Pollution Control and Ecology Commission. And that was our administrative relief, was through them. We had to satisfy all administrative relief before we went to the courts. And so we made our arguments first to the PC&E Commission. We had some friendly people there. Not all of them by any means, but we had a few who shared our concerns. And for example, that's where the decision was made after it was realized that the weaknesses of the public notification process. That was the body who made the changes to strengthen that process after the fact.
Thanks,
Any
Gordon.
other
Are there
questions?
any questions?
All right. Well, like I said, feel free to check out our website. Email me if you have any questions. The link is on that website to me. I'd be glad to chat with you.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you
You
so
bet.
much, Gordon. This was great.
All right, Melissa, you want to take us home?
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, let's see here. Bear with me for a minute. Yeah, so we've got, we are so grateful for everyone who is able to be with us, all of our presenters, as well as all of you who are in attendance. And just to wrap up, we wanted to, Sophie and I at MCE wanted to make sure you were aware of our CAFO toolkit. It gives you the resources you need to watchdog Missouri CAFOs for regulatory violations, environmental concerns, and other various CAFO activities that impact our economic, environmental, human, and animal well-being. So we've outlined kind of what is in it. This is one of the ways that MCE empowers community-led advocacy like the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance by sharing this information to make sure you feel you have what you need to take action. So what we have in there includes how to find CAFO permits that are on public notice, meaning they have an opportunity for you to weigh in and submit a comment to the Department of Natural Resources, how to learn about the changes to Missouri's rules and regulations. We provide tips on how to write public comments, how to request public records so that you know whether or not a CAFO near you or upstream from you might be having suspicious activity, or maybe just simply not, complying with the simple requirements that our government requires of them. We've got also information on how to find violation notices, where and how to submit environmental concern reports, and tips for providing testimony, both written and verbal, before the Missouri legislature. If you are unfamiliar with the Missouri legislature, I will say that the written testimony is new. During COVID, we've been able to submit written testimony digitally for safety concerns that have led people to not want to come to the Capitol. I do expect written statements to still be allowed moving forward. And if you stick around with MCE through the legislative session, as well as Missouri Parks, of course, Missouri Parks Association, you would be able to know when bills related to CAFOs are moving and how to engage. Here are a little more visual of what's inside of the toolkit. You can go there online. I think Sophie will put the actual toolkit link in the chat if she hasn't already. You can also see there at the bottom of the toolkit, if you were to click on the link, we do have these step-by-step videos that are indicated on this slide to help you understand how to navigate the various government web pages you need to find permits that are being proposed, rule changes that are proposed, as well as finding out when bills are moving through the legislature and what hearing rooms their hearings will be in. We also have additional resources like our interactive CAFO story map. We have a map of showing our various water bodies throughout the state in relation to CAFOs. If you have any questions as you explore the MCE website and the toolkit and any of our other resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to Sophie or myself. Our emails are listed here on the slide. And we are just so grateful to be with you all tonight. Let's see, is there anything else? Oh, yes, on the next slide, we do want to make sure you know one of the things that MCE offers is a way to regularly communicate with us about the tools in the toolkit and when you can engage on those various activities. If you join MCE's CAFO Action Network, we can regularly provide these opportunities. I hope, Sophie, everything okay?
Yeah, I was gonna go ahead and wrap up, but that's all right.
Okay, I'm sorry. You go ahead. You'll do it better than me. Come on in.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. All right. Well, yeah, if you joined as a CAN member, you'd stay informed through email updates and alerts. You can get involved with us on action opportunities from those updates. We also hope that individuals from various communities across the state who are concerned about the impacts of CAFOs can engage with one another through this space and advocate for common sense protections from CAFO pollution. There's a link here on the slide. I think we will be sharing the slides afterwards. Is that right, Sophie? Or at least the link. They probably can't click on this sign up here is all I'm trying to say. Great. Well, with that, I just want to thank you all for helping keep Missouri's people and their environment healthy. Again, if you have any questions about the work that MCE does or anything that was covered today, please don't hesitate to reach out to Sophie or myself, and we will make sure to send out the recording and contact information from our speakers today.
I feel very heartened by our conversation tonight. You know, we're fighting a tough battle, but our parks and public lands are certainly something to rally around. I would encourage folks to pass along questions. I can stay on for a little bit longer if there's any questions that we want to answer live. Gonna go ahead and open it back up. All right. Well, I apologize for the somewhat abridged recording and the quick wrap up, but we will share that video recording with you all afterwards. Please pass along questions. You can also sign up for our legislative alerts, and we'll make sure that some of those links that didn't make it in the chat make it to you via email. Thank you so much to our speakers again for joining us, for everyone taking time out of your evenings.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Great.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
6
Thank
months to a
you.
year
Thank
from now.
you.
And so it's really gonna
Bye, everybody.
be rough for us to get everything fixed up.